Let's start. And then, okay. And then, where's it at? Nope, not. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our community and conversations. Tonight's discussion centers around what's happening and the ongoing issues of book bans and what they mean for our communities, our children, and our collective freedom to learn and share stories. So, across the country, we have seen a sharp increase in efforts to censor books that tell the stories of Black authors, LGBTQ plus voices, and others who experience challenging, dominant narratives. So tonight we want to get an understanding of what's at stake, how we as a community can act, and what you all are doing in your organizations to really advocate for this. So, we are joined by two amazing panelists that I am so excited to be on here with tonight. So, I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves and tell you where you're from, and a little bit about your organizations and what you do. And Kens, if you want to go first, only because you're holding the baby.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Tanisha, for having me. And hey, everyone, it's good to see you. My name is Mackenzie or Kens Nicholson. I'm the Senior Director of Moms Rising in New Hampshire. And if you don't know about Moms Rising, we are a national grassroots organization where we work to make the lives of moms and our families better. And we have a state moms for state here in New Hampshire. And I've got a small but mighty team of 4 folks here on the ground working on fellowships and different, we do advocacy and grassroots organizing. So it's mom issues, the things that moms care about are a lot because moms are multi-issue people and they're busy. Like this little guy is about to like prove how busy they are. I'm joined by my nephew Jet tonight. I'm actually in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, joining you from my best friend's house, who just had a baby, and I'm here helping out. So I'm super excited to be here and to talk to you all. And I will kick it over to you, Jacqueline.
And I feel like I need a prop because your mom's rising and you got a baby. So I'm just gonna like hold a book over here.
There
um, so I'm Jacqueline Benson, and I am with an organization called Authors Against Book Bans. And we are, unlike Moms Rising, we are a single issue. So it is book bans and only book bans. It's an all volunteer organization that is relatively new. Think it was founded about a year and a half ago. No staff. I don't think we even have nonprofit status to accept donations yet. But it is a network of authors across the U.S. who are united in our opposition to book banning and restrictions on the freedom to read. And I am the New Hampshire regional leader. So the boots on the ground here in Granite State for AABB.
Nice. I didn't know there was a new organization, so I'm learning something new. I really thought this was like in place for a minute. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We will post socials and all this stuff for you guys on um, afterwards and on our pages. So getting into book bans and into that advocacy is a different space than just right general. And although it's all the same, but how did you get into this work to join the fight against book bans? Like why this organization and why did Moms Rising take it up? You guys can go at your leisure.
Thanks. Yeah. I was reflecting on this today and I was feeling happy that I get the sort of freedom in my work to work on work that is engaging to me personally. But we started working in book bans because we were seeing this growing movement of efforts behind censorship creeping up in the Granite State. And it didn't just start with book bans. There's been, many things over the years that lawmakers in Concord have tried to pass that impact, erasing accurate history and stories from our schools. And as moms, and as Moms Rising, we really care deeply about engaging in work that is relevant and that our members really care about. And so when we started to, learn more about what was sort of creeping up as this censorship movement and this movement of so-called like parental rights and Moms for Liberty and Project 2025 and like kind of all of that, seeing the book bans play out in a really diabolical way was something that struck me as someone who is a lover of books myself and someone who cares deeply about like my own kids and the kids in my community having access to like accurate history and the stories that help them develop empathy and critical thinking skills. And um, I've never before seen it quite as um, contentious as it is lately. And I think this year was the first year that we saw a bill like the ones that we're going to talk about later get through both bodies of the legislature. And so the political momentum is also something that I'm thinking a lot about, is like, this is happening in New Hampshire, but it's not unique to us. And it really is part of a movement. And so if they come for our books first, like it really worries me about what they'll come for next. And we as moms we don't like censorship, and we don't like you telling us what our kids can and can't read. And of course, people in New Hampshire really love that local control. So all those, ingredients combined create the perfect recipe for a Moms Rising intervention. And Moms Rising is no thank you on book bans.
Yeah, and from the Authors Against Book Ban side of it, obviously this is their core issue. How I got involved, because I just sort of discovered the organization in the last year. I'm a fantasy writer, so I will use a fantasy analogy for this. With everything that's going on right now in the world, I wanted to pick my bridge of Khazad Doom and do my Gandalf and plant my staff and say, "Thou shalt not pass." And I needed a niche. I wanted to choose my corner to fight in, and book bans, being an author myself, felt like an obvious match. My background before I was full-time writing, for several years, I did nonpartisan state policy analysis for a nonprofit in New Hampshire. So I knew I had some additional skills that I could bring to the table to help the organization out, which is probably why I ended up having the regional leader job dropped on me. But very glad to be here, very glad to be joining the fight. Obviously, as a teller of stories, I believe very passionately in their power, and that in controlling ideas and controlling exposure to stories and what narratives we're allowed to tell. That's really about controlling who has a right to exist, who has a right to be heard. And in a democracy, we all need to have a right to be heard. So.
Um, they've been framing, and by they, I'll say the collective they, um, but they've been framing it as really protecting our kids, right? That has been the basis and foundation for a lot of what's going on. What are you really seeing on the ground? Is protecting our kids really a thing, or are
No,
we doing more damage?
this is about control. This is not about protection.
Mhm.
That's why so many of the books that they're going after are books that have LGBTQ plus representation, books that talk about the history of racism and race struggle. They are books that talk about sex. Um, when we are, this is not, if we were about protecting children, we wouldn't be trying to close off pathways to validation and understanding. um, we're harming kids by taking these books off the shelves. um, but sitting in these hearings and listening to the folks who are testifying in favor of these bans, I hear a lot of fear and I hear a lot of anger. But what I hear that they're afraid of and angry about is not being able to control how their children are going to think and who their children are going to be.
Mm.
Yeah, plus one. I mean, on the parental rights issue, it's kind of like if it's a parental rights issue, they're not talking to half of the parents out there. Because we know we actually did some polling in New Hampshire this past spring that showed an overwhelming amount of Granite Staters don't support book bans. They don't support efforts to censor our schools. So this is really coming from a minority of folks who are quote unquote representing, the most extreme couple of cases out there of parents who have bad experiences. But we know for certain that the lawmakers that are making these decisions don't even look like the communities that they represent. And that it's all, in my opinion, about anything that looks different from them, right? And their what they deem to be like status quo. And so, yeah, it's despicable behavior, really.
These book bans really, for us, it feels like it's just removing that access to truth and history, which is what is fueling
Mhm.
my fire because there has been so much to people of color, marginalized communities, all of that, that we have been forced to keep telling our stories, forced to put our names and put our stories in the history books and in the schools. And so I feel like we're continuously in this circle, which brings us back to it's not just the people, it is the system. And so often we have this conversation of why isn't things changing and why do we continuously go through these, whether it's civil rights, whether it's the Black Lives Matter movement, whether, we keep going back and back and back and back. And until we break that system of oppression on 1,000 levels, we're going to keep doing this. So I'm hoping this is our last generation doing this, but I doubt it. But a lot of the authors, or many of the books that are being banned, are Black authors, are queer stories, stories about justice, whether it's social justice or racial justice. Why do you think that is? I mean, we all know the answer, but let's talk it out.
Yeah. I mean, you said it perfectly right then, Tanisha. It's like the fact that the voices of Black authors or queer authors or, any marginalized identity, we're teaching them that it's normal or controversial to be any of those identities.
Hmm.
And that, you know, I don't know, in my world, like diversity, equity, and inclusion are not scary words, and that we know that inclusion benefits everyone.
Hmm.
So,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And dismantling power structures
Hmm.
requires people to be aware of other people's experience
Yes.
and to think outside of their own boxes. And so if we remove those stories from the shelf and only allow people access to one point of view or a very limited dominant point of view, then that's how you keep power structures intact, you
Hmm.
know. So
Hmm.
it's a big part of what all of this is about. I think that's why particularly the pressure and interest in book banning that we see coming down from the national level is I think absolutely motivated by keeping power structures intact.
And it was
I.
interesting to me what you said to Tanisha, just like sort of struck a chord with me about like the history of storytelling and wanting to sit with that for just a minute and think about like the impact that storytelling has on marginalized communities, particularly like Black folks. It's ironic to me and also not ironic that that's the first thing they go for is storytelling.
Mhm.
Hmm. You know, when you think about Black history, African American history, um, storytelling has been the way that we have carried our stories, right? Our narratives. We, from slavery on, were not allowed to tell those stories. Telling the stories around the fire or in the cabins and all of that, and then retelling them generation after generation was the only way people knew where they were from, the only way people knew their history and their families after being separated. And so now that they are in books and these authors are telling these stories, to have it to be taken away is just, I can't even put into words the feeling that means. And then we take it even further to the generation now of families look totally different. And so kids want to see their families in what they're learning. They want to see people who look like them or have dynamics like them in what they're learning, right? Because we fought so hard for just basic rights in all the categories. And so we're continuing this fight. Um, One of the things I've been thinking about is really the social and emotional development of our kiddos. And a lot of folks, the conversation always starts K through 12, right? That kindergarten. And what we don't realize is that social and emotional development really starts back at the infant, toddler, preschool stage. And so my question is also a statement is how do we get this understanding into that stage of preschool development where we know by age 3 kids are starting to realize, oh my gosh, my skin looks different than yours, or my two moms is different than your mom and dad, or I'm raised by my grandparent and not by my mom, right? Because kids start realizing that by age 3. We know that developmentally. So, how do we make an impact in this area at that level, and what can we possibly do? Or what are your thoughts? It's a loaded question. I'm sorry, I'm off script.
No, that's all right. Well, I mean, what comes to mind for me in particular is that like some of the books that I've seen pop up on some of the kind of most frequently banned titles are like picture books.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking specifically of like some like, books for younger readers like that that represent like trans identity
Mm-hmm.
and massive targets for
Yeah.
this stuff because the argument being that to be queer at all is somehow also sexual and that therefore it's inappropriate to tell your children about it,
Mm-hmm.
but which is wrong. It's not true. And eliminating those stories like you were saying, Tanisha, it's like you're making them feel even more isolated, even more alone, um where we have the choice to expose everyone to a wide variety of stories. And then not only do those kids feel like,
Mm-hmm.
look, I'm there too, but all the other kids in the classroom get to see that this is part of the spectrum of life
Mm-hmm.
and that it should be all treated with respect. And that's, I think, just as important, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was thinking like, oh my gosh, every time I speak, Jet startles. So he's like, whoa, what are you talking about? I was thinking about how we talked about being multi-issue people. And I know, Tanisha, you and I work together on a lot of different issues, but one of the places where our work intersects is like in the early care and education space, and thinking a lot about a lot of things in that in the child care, but early education, early care too, spaces, and how can we equip and make folks feel more confident. I think one of the things that's really unfortunate about book bans is that it creates this like sort of phenomenon of like self-censorship, where even if they don't actually pull books off the shelves, it can give folks a scare, especially when we try to pass bills like the one we tried to pass this past year, where there would be literal criminal elements, if you had some of these books in your libraries. um, that kind of fear that creates doesn't make it any easier to be a child care provider or an early educator in the system either. And so I'm really thankful that we get to work together across many issues to like bring equity into all of our spaces.
Yeah. So, what happens long term if these bills actually pass? And we'll get into what those bills are, but what do you see as the consequences?
um I mean, I see harm. I
Mm-hmm.
see harm. I think that if you if you take books with queer representation off the shelves, you take books about our history and the history of racism in this country off the shelves, and then you have children that feel more isolated. You're normalizing. You have space where there's more normalization for things like racism and homophobia in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom. Um, these that's what we should. If we want to talk about protecting kids, that's the stuff we should be talking about. Um, I and what will those children, how will they grow up? How will they grow up? The kids that who aren't seeing themselves on the page, what do they end up growing up to become? How much are they missing?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the children who maybe don't see that, they're not represent part of that representation, but they're now their ability to learn and their ability to understand parts of their community is gone, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's dangerous and
Yeah.
Mhm.
scary
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
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 Plus one to everything Jacqueline said. I mean, I think for me, when I think about the biggest thing that I want my children to take away from like their younger years and who I want them to be when they're older is like developing an understanding for people who look and are different from them, empathy and understanding and community. And so, +1 on the harm and just also the galvanizing or the politicization of these issues is so distracting from the real issues. Like these are not the actual issues that are
Right.
banging down families' doors right now. We're having a hard time, getting folks SNAP and WIC benefits right now and childcare during a government shutdown and all these other things. And it's like this is such a distraction,
Mhm.
which is so infuriating to me because I'm like, you picked something really, I know they do it on purpose. It's all laid out, folks.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Mhm. It's the plan. Um, so let's get back into the bills. We fought really hard earlier this year to fight the first one, maybe the second one. Um, talk a little bit. I let you guys talk about what are these bills we won now, or the first time. Now, what's at stake? What's next?
Yeah. You want to kick it, Jack, or you want me to do
I
it?
can, I can. I was letting you take it if you wanted to.
Yeah, we can
So
we can go together.
we can go together. So for those who are new to the issue, the bill that Tisha's talking about that we managed to get a win on was HB 324. So this was a really nasty book banning bill
Mhm.
that had a clause in it that removed protection from criminal charges from teachers, which so it would have exposed them to possible criminal penalties for the books that they brought into their classrooms. Um, and uh, it was amazing how many organizations in the Granite State just said hell no to this.
Mhm.
And I think at the beginning, a lot of us were sort of working in our separate corners. And then Mackenzie, I think you and John Kraska from every library were pretty pivotal in um, bringing everybody together, because I think a lot of us were finding our way to one or the other of you as we were looking for who we could partner with and what other people were doing and how we could
Yeah.
support each other on this. And a whole lot of very cool advocacy that took place, postcard campaigns. There was the read-in at the State House. AABB pulled together a press conference with some best-selling authors, including Jodi Picoult, who was able to come in and can obviously speak very personally about this because she's one of the most banned authors in America, which is bizarre. But
Mhm.
um, and though this bill did pass both the House and Senate, we were able to put enough pressure on Governor Ayotte that we got a veto. So that was a huge win, and it's very promising. The issue is not gone. We fully expect this thing to rise from the grave. And it will probably be doing that in the form of a bill called SB 33, which was retained over from last year. That is now sitting in the House Education Policy and Administration Committee, and they're going to need to act on that pretty soon. I think the deadline is coming up for acting on those retained bills. But this coalition, Freedom to Read Coalition of Works, we're already watching, we're already getting ready. Everybody's mobilizing their various resources to bring the fight to this bill and knock it down, and then working on some cool local proactive stuff to start maybe more community level empowering folks to organize to do what they can to protect their schools and their libraries from book bans at the local level as well. So
I'll just add that two things about those bills. One, on House Bill 324, the bill that we were able to get a veto from Governor Ayotte, there is a potential for a veto override here. We would need quite a few votes to be flipped in order for that to happen. But if there were not enough lawmakers attending the session on the day where they try to pull this stunt, like they could potentially do it. And the other thing I'll say about Senate Bill 33 is it's a mean, ugly cousin of House Bill 324 in the sense that it's a little bit more vague. It applies to not just books, but materials. So we're talking about things like maps. This is like where I get really itchy. We're talking about like art sculptures and instructional materials at school and the amount of non-description in this bill, the amount of vague that exists, it's problematic in and of itself, but could be really scary if it became law.
So folks need to understand that this is not just about the book bans anymore, but this is overall educational censorship in the school, what's actually being taught, the materials given out, and even collaborations within the school, right? So when we used to be able to go to the school and hand out information or be like, send this flyer out to, parents from partner organizations, that will happen no more if that organization may be controversial. Is
Yeah, I
that,
mean that's already that attack has already been
yeah,
underway with the whole divisive
yeah.
concepts ban.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I think it's important to point out too that all of this is unconstitutional.
Right.
It's
Yes.
not legal.
Right.
That doesn't stop them from trying to do it. It does give us hopes that even if something gets through the government, we could drag it through courts.
Hmm.
But we would rather it didn't get to that point, and we could kill it before it happens. But
Hmm.
but none of this stuff is in line with free speech law. None
Hmm.
of it. So
But the problem is that this comes with scare tactics. And so even if teachers or administrators want to say, F that bill, we're still going to do what we're going to do, that comes with potential consequences for them.
yeah, and
Right.
you get into that realm of soft censorship, which is
Hmm.
harder to document. So I think there's a lot of that goes on that we just don't know about because
Right.
it's hard to catalog or track the things that don't happen, you know.
Mhm.
But I think that's absolutely, I mean, even just as a mom in New Hampshire and as someone who's married to a teacher, I've seen the impact that the divisive concepts law, which I believe did get held up in court. I think that's,
Mhm.
it's not active, but it did scare a lot of people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it has impacted what they're teaching. And that's not okay.
Well, and it's impacting the after school activities, it's impacting those social clubs that people or that our kids really found their space in their community in. And to have that at school and to have your community and your group at school is so important for confidence and for identity and just feeling like you have somewhere when you may not have it outside of school. And so to take that away for all of our kids is just that's trauma and that's harm. And so when we talk about protecting our kids, what kind of protecting are we doing? And can we get a definition of what that means? Um,
Literally.
but I wouldn't be BLM and have to ask the hard questions of in the working spaces. Up there's my dog. There my hand. I'm gonna close my door. Hold.
That's all right. I had the cat trying to climb my chair a minute ago. So
So he's barking because I think my son's coming in, so hopefully he'll stop. But I'd like to ask the hard question of in the work that you guys do, which is two totally different ways that you do the work and two totally different ways that you advocate. How do you ensure that those marginalized groups or people of color, Black, Indigenous, all are included in kind of leading these advocacy efforts?
This is a core commitment of Moms Rising and all of the grassroots work that we do. And I talked about this a little bit in my introduction, but we really believe in member-led campaigns. And so what that means is we don't just speak for families, right? We create the space for them to share their families and lead their own organizing. And one of the ways that I think we show up for all families is making advocacy and this work more accessible because it is not accessible. It's not accessible to regular people, never mind marginalized communities. And so making sure that the work that we do is, again, accessible, fun, easy, doesn't take 1,500 like clicks to get through something is really important to us. And we continue to bring underrepresented groups into our work and build that community because we are, again, similar to book bans. And as someone who doesn't live in that identity, I'm learning from so many underrepresented communities by being with them and working together. And that's how we build like a better New Hampshire that reflects like the actual diversity of our state. So I'm proud to do it.
And over on the AABB side of things, like I said, as a newer organization and one that is currently all volunteer driven, we're basically a pack of chaos demons. So, in terms of like organized policies, I think a lot of that is still in development. But because it is an organization that platforms and features banned authors, um, I think like half of our leadership are BIPOC or queer folks, and we're constantly platforming and trying to raise the voices of the authors that are being banned. And so that's particularly those marginalized voices. And then utilizing um, authors who have larger platforms to bring their voices into the fight and use those platforms to spotlight these books that are being banned and that are under attack, and to bring more public pressure and public attention onto these fights when they're happening. So that's why the press conferences, we've done them. We did it here in New Hampshire, but we've done them in a bunch of other states too. I know. And this isn't like as much as an official leg of the AABB project, but a lot of the authors that are founding members and prominent members of AABB are also involved with the lawsuits that are being brought against these bills when they do pass. And so we've been very much kind of coordinating press work and public pressure around those as well. So definitely still plenty of work to do.
Mhm.
But I know that commitment is definitely there as we continue to grow as an organization. And particularly for me here in New Hampshire, I am looking for all the new author friends I can
Yeah.
make. um,
Y'all
and
heard it. Be Jacqueline's friend.
hey.
Um, can we talk a little bit about New Hampshire Freedom to Read Coalition, and tell folks really what that is and maybe some work we have done as a coalition?
Yeah, I think this is like another piece of your previous question, Tanisha, about how we step up for marginalized communities. And I think that coalition building and some of the other work, other coalition building that we do together is a piece of that. And it's about bringing together, many different. We've learned to like slow down, take a step back. Like Jacqueline said, we were sort of all flailing separately, but when we can like take a beat, put some trust into some relationships and come across issue, we can bring forces together that don't normally come together. And it's making all of our movements so much stronger. And it was and no different in this coalition. And so, like Jacqueline said, really came together as like many folks just working on this on the outskirts and needing a little bit of coordination. And what's a mom if not a really good like list maker or task delegator, so we've helped bring folks together and helped grow this coalition. It kind of like happened really overnight, but I'm really proud of what we built because not only do we have some real solid wins, but I think just the organizing power of the people who are in our coalition ranges from like Black Lives Matter to Able New Hampshire to some of the education folks like AFT and teachers and advocacy groups. And anyways, I just think like we're bringing together a really great mix of folks who represent underrepresented folks and also do it in a way that isn't super transactional. And so for some reason, this is a good mix of folks that have just like feels really powerful.
Yeah, I will add to that and say it really shows our collective power.
Mhm.
And also when we come together in numbers, we get more done, right? And so to remove those silos and join in and say, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what BLM is going to do versus Mom Rising versus AAB is like, it doesn't make the fight seem so big, if that makes sense. And so we can tackle our portion and push that part. And the same thing for the DEI coalition that is out there. We can take our portions and still fight, but also know that there's no gaps into what we're fighting for, if that makes sense. So, um, what's going on with the libraries? Because I don't think that if you can talk a little bit about it without getting into any challenging trouble, but I don't think a lot of people know what's happening with libraries right now.
You go, Jack.
You want to talk about rye?
Yeah.
Um,
Let's get
well, I mean,
into it.
so we're seeing these fights at the state level too, but we know that part of the 2025 Project 2025 agenda has also been to push things at the local level. And we have had some places even here in New Hampshire where folks have taken that to heart, and we get these locally elected boards and officials who are trying to engage in restricting expression, restricting speech in our communities. Um, so one situation that Freedom to Read Coalition has been monitoring, that I've been kind of keeping an eye on here, is an issue that came up in the Rye Library, where the board of trustees of the library waded in to cancel a queer allyship event that was going to be held at the library. Um, and they have claimed that they were doing that for safety reasons. But it feels an awful lot like viewpoint censorship, especially since it came on the heels of the board also asking the library to remove pride flags from the children's room.
Mm.
But it's also been an amazing example seeing in Rye how the community has risen in response to this. They had a substantial protest outside the library that got the event reinstated, and they have been continuing to put pressure on the board to make sure that there aren't further efforts to try to restrict what materials are available or what programs are taking place in the library. And that has all been community folks. I went to a meeting there, people who are like, we have no idea what we're doing, but we're doing it anyway, and we're going to make it happen. So these paying attention to what's happening at your local library, and particularly in your school boards, and keeping an eye on those school board meeting agendas and showing up when you can for those school board meetings. And I know one of the things, so folks definitely want to be paying attention to what's happening at the local level. Um, and it can be harder to get looped in on that stuff. So finding the people in your community that are in the know, and then starting those dialogues and sharing information with each other so that everybody's aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, every community has a different, well, not every community, but there are many different structures of library trustees and school boards. And so the power or the decision-making skill around the decisions that are made lie in these different bodies, depending on which community you're looking at. But, I think like more often than not, if you are like a regular New Hampshire voter, oftentimes I think most folks don't know what those smaller elected roles in local communities do or what impact they might have on their lives. And so one of the initiatives that Moms Rising is working on is getting folks more information about who those, say 5 or so folks on the bottom of your ballot are, what their roles are, and what that actually means for your community. Because I think like we're really in an aging state like New Hampshire where we do place such significant, importance on running for public office. There are not enough qualified candidates for these roles often, and because it's young people are busy, right? And so the folks who are end up available may not reflect the actual diversity or the perspectives of the people in the schools or the communities. And so that's another reason why we've sort of found ourselves in this position is we've been over busy, and they realized we were really busy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think honestly too that like once people do know, it's not as overwhelming as they think it is. These local offices, they're a commitment, but it's something that I'm a working mom, and I serve in a local office in my town, and it's manageable. But I think a lot of people get intimidated, just like you said, Mackenzie, because they don't know exactly what the responsibilities are or what needs to be done. So
Well, and I
education is
think
huge.
I think they also get, I think as one thing that we always talk about as people of color is that we're afraid of any talk back. We're afraid of any stereotyping. We're afraid of any damage control, right? What's going to be said? What's going to be done? What are the people going to say about us, in certain towns and places? And that's one thing that I think we don't often talk about enough is that the fear behind people of color or Black individuals, going for these offices and giving that time and energy for little to no pay, or whatever that may look like. And so, how do we begin to overcome that and start to remove those barriers? And what does support for that look like? When you put your life out there, even in roles like we're in right now, you put your life out there. I can't just do or say something because it's now going to be, it's not Tanisha, the mother, or Tanisha, just the person. It's now Tanisha, the spokesperson for BLM New Hampshire, and so it becomes a whole to do. And how do we get over that is the question that I think we have a lot of, challenges with.
Mhm.
I do not have answers for you there, my friend.
I know, me either.
But keeping those damn books in the library might help.
Though, beyond opposing just those book bans, right? Like, how can families in our communities really build that culture of truth telling? Like, for young people, especially, what can we do?
Have you ever been stuck in the back, like stuck in a car ride with your kid and they ask you those questions that they ask you because they know you can't escape the car?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like for me, that is one of the best ways that we can continue to have like great conversations is like talk with your kids and read them these stories and buy these books and support the authors. And I even during Banned Books Week, which we celebrated 2 weeks ago, all of us did. We had great coalition events happening, and um, I reached out to our school librarian, and I've never really reached out to her before. Like, she's a great person, right? And so I just wrote her a note and told her a little bit about the work that we do and about how, like, I'm so thankful that she's in this thankless job, and thank you for protecting our access to, history and everything. And she wrote me back the nicest message. And honestly, that felt like something. And it's just a little act of kindness, but just like reaching out to our community members and the people who are writing these stories and working in our libraries, like, and saying thank you. And I don't know, being in community is what I'm thinking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at, I think books are a great starting point for conversations with kids, like you were saying, Mackenzie, but then also getting involved with and staying aware of the broader DEI work that's taking place in the schools, which has been very much under attack. And I know in the school district that I'm in, that there is a very active community movement around protecting the DEI programming that's in school. And it's going to take that. It's going to take continued public pressure to protect those programs, and to make sure that we continue to create welcoming communities for everybody, and do better at it than.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think getting, and that's something that the kids can get involved with too, you know.
I echo the sentiment of building community. When we look back onto the civil rights movement, when we look back into a lot of the racial and social justice movements, it involved community. It
Mhm.
was not a one person show. It was really communities coming together to also take care of our own, right? To give free breakfast, to have the after school programs, to protest together and stand as one. And so we as a community need to continue that, because we know it works. Just from history, we know it works, and also from our coalition building and collective impacts, we know that it continues to work. So I'm going to ask this last question, and I have to make it cheerful. What gives you hope? We've been talking a lot about negativity. So, what gives you hope in this moment?
I mean, he is really cute, this little kid.
Mhm.
That and also just like our collective movement we were talking about earlier and the shared vision for breaking down censorship and working together to defeat these really, out of left field lawmakers who are trying to pass these extreme laws that people aren't asking for. Like, I'm reinvigorated by some of that work. I just saw us do it, so I know it's not impossible. It just takes a lot of coordination and a lot of community work, but I know we can do it. So I'm I'm fearful, but I'm like, we're gonna do it anyways. I would tell my daughter, it's okay if you don't want to do it because you're scared. You're gonna do it scared anyways, and then you're gonna feel better on the other side.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fear is very rational at this point. There's a lot to be scared of out there. But I think I was out on the streets on Saturday for No Kings and seeing how many people came out for that and how much of an atmosphere of of just like celebration of our right to be there. I think that people are getting past the shock of how quickly a lot of our rights have been under attack, and they are getting ready to move towards action and having these coalitions, having these communities of activists and communities that are continuing to do outreach to try to find more of these people and give them a space to find their niche, to find their bridge to put their staff on. That's what gives me hope. The movement is growing. um, and I think it's going to continue to grow. And the more of us are there, the more power we all have together. So,
Well, thank you so much for this great conversation. It was powerful. I appreciate your leadership in this and protecting the stories and the truth telling and representation. To everyone who has joined us and who may view this later, this work really goes beyond this conversation. So follow Moms Rising, follow Authors Against Book Bans, go to your local school board meetings. Make your voices heard. Midterm elections are coming up soon. Get out there and vote. Change who's in office. Our stories matter, and the fight for them is a fight for our shared future. In the chat, there is a link to a letter that will go to the governor. Sign that letter. It is against SB 33. That letter will go out probably in a week or so, but when we realize that this is going up for veto, or let's just say veto. I leave you with just some questions to think about. Um, where do you have influence as a parent, as an educator, as a student, or a neighbor to really push back against censorship and support inclusive learning? What programs are you going to? What groups are you attending? Who are you following on social media, and what are you pushing? And just so you know, Moms Rising has a banned book club, and so does BLM New Hampshire. Our book club starts the first Sunday in November. We are reading Sada Shakur, the autobiography. So get a book. If you need a book, we'll get you a copy. You can also go to the library, but if you like me and like to write in books, you can't return those back to the library. Um, so reach out and we will get you a copy. But please, there are so much resources out there that we can continue this fight together. And stay tuned. We will have another conversation next month, same place, third Tuesday of the month, 7 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I'm very glad we could be here.